Good morning, distinguished delegates. You're welcome to the fourth session of the meeting of the Technical Commission. Looking at the order of business for this morning's session, we really have a tall order. You recall that on Saturday we considered the third batch of papers under agenda item 30, and from the order of the business, we have to look at the fourth batch, the fifth batch, the sixth batch, the seventh batch. Then we also have to review and approve the draft reports for agenda item 27, 28, and 29. So we will have to manage our time very, very effectively. Yesterday at the executive committee, they had similar challenges, so they had to resort to limiting presentations to 1 minute and interventions also to 1 minute. And the audio technician was at hand to ensure that this worked. I mean, the audio will suddenly go off after 1 minute and you realize that your time was out. But I believe we will stick to the 1 minute presentation and 1 minute intervention. Does that sound okay for all of us to enable us complete the agenda? I see no objections. So thank you very much. You recall that on Saturday afternoon, we considered a third batch of papers under agenda item 30, and we had to rush through a bit. But following that, we've had requests from industry and from Finland to provide further clarifications on some of the papers. So without much ado, I will call on Finland. My system is still booting up, but I think we can proceed. Finland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As such, Finland has no further comments on the issue, but I was speaking on behalf of the other European states, and they might want to comment this batch. Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'll call on industry. Who will speak for industry? ACCAIA?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone, and thanks, everyone, for their indulgence. With respect to Working Paper 232 and Working Paper 360, ICCAIA would like to express its support. Industry has supported the development of the GADs since the beginning and remains committed to developing and fielding technical solutions to meet the GAD's objectives. However, ICCAIA would like to make the Assembly aware that the airborne solutions for ADT will not be ready. Autonomous distress tracking, the airborne elements will not be ready in time to support the current applicability date of 1 January 2021 as specified in Annex 6. And this is due, in fact, that the detailed regulations, certification criteria, and acceptable means of compliance are still under development. Although requirements from, for example, the European Union, EASA, are expected by the end of this year, this would not allow sufficient time for avionics manufacturers to develop solutions and for the airframe manufacturers to integrate those solutions into airplanes and get the required airworthiness certification. We're of the understanding that other states have not published the requirements or regulations for autonomous distress tracking with sufficient detail to support airborne implementation and certification. This situation further justifies the need for ICAO to reconsider the timeline on autonomous distress tracking and adjust as necessary. ICAO, representing the worldwide manufacturers, supports the idea of a survey be conducted with some urgency and that the survey be done in sufficient time that will be available to adjust the timeline well before the current applicability date if we see that the need is there. Mr. Chair, thank you again for your indulgence.
Thank you very much, ICAO. Will the Secretariat want to comment on the issue of the ADT readiness? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everybody. The Secretariat would just like to make it clear or clarify that we had two workshops to deal with ADT. One was held in April to validate the functional specifications of ADT, and one in July for the technical specifications. In those workshops, we had 10 states represented and over 10 ADT providers that have systems already installed on aircraft. This is why we feel that we note the concerns by ICAO, and we will strive to ensure to get that survey out as soon as possible. But we do note that not all the industry has the same opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Secretary, for the clarification on the ADT. So let's conclude our discussions on Batch 3 flight operations. We will go straight to, is that Finland? What country, please? Spain. Spain, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning to everyone. On working paper 108 presented by Finland, I would like to clarify that we agree that the action items to be included in the draft resolution in the paper be included as action items in the report for the Commission meeting. We would just like to add one additional item, which is in the executive summary of the working paper, but it's not in the resolution in the paper, and that is B of the executive summary, which says urge states to strengthen cooperation so as to achieve effective oversight of cross-border operations. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. I think it could be conceded. So the action items in the draft resolution will be considered in the report, and the point B, air states to strengthen cooperation so as to strengthen cross oversight will also reflect. Thank you very much. Austria.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor. Based on the summary that we have heard on Saturday, Austria would like to briefly express a few comments to working paper 303 presented by China. While we could support the intent of the paper to review the requirements for twin-engine in-flight shutdown, we do not concur with the proposed actions focusing on revising the current IFSD rates and limiting the ability to gain early ETOPS approval. ICAO does not predicate IFSD rates. As mentioned in the working paper presented by China, those are established by the major primary certification agencies. The reduction by a factor of 10 compared to the target rates that are currently established seems to be rather arbitrary. The only justification could be the fact that such a reduction would seem feasible considering the in-service shutdown rates of a number of engine types. We would therefore like to invite the Technical Commission to take that into consideration. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Austria. Italy, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, distinguished delegates. Thank you for the floor. I will speak to support Working Paper 271 presented by ICAO. And as particular, we support the establishment of instrument flight procedures with vertical guidance, especially performance-based procedures on airports open to commercial operation as well as the data-driven analysis. Common work between stakeholders fostering careful analysis of available data would contribute to identify the areas on which to concentrate future efforts and priorities towards improving the safety of these operations. Awaiting the outcomes of this analysis, we consider turboprop operational safety as a priority not to be taken into consideration. I believe that the working paper mentioned that should be a high priority, so we think that waiting for this conclusion, it should be a priority, not a high priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Italy. And that will reflect in the report. Israel, you want the floor?
There is actually nobody in the seat for Israel. I think it's an error.
Thank you. I've noted all your interventions, and we can add that the Commission notes that some sectors of the industry have expressed concerns with the state of readiness, and the issue of WP271, turboprops safety being a priority will also reflect in the report. That concludes discussion of agenda item 30.3 on flight operations. So we go straight to the tall order of business for today. We start straight with 30.4, which deals with competencies and aviation medicine. So I'll now invite the United States to present working paper 296. Please remember to keep your presentation to a minute and interventions later on during discussions to a minute. Thank you very much. US, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to present this paper on behalf of the United States, Canada, Peru, and Trinidad and Tobago. I would also like to acknowledge with appreciation support from Argentina, Indonesia, Israel, Mexico, Panama, and the Republic of Korea. Concerns over flight deck human factors have created additional pressure to increase reliance on automation in commercial aviation. Although increased use of automation has enhanced safety, this trend is also likely contributing to a lack of practice and therefore potentially a degradation of manual flight control piloting skills. These skills are essential for pilot confidence and competence, and they are necessary in taking control of the aircraft when operational circumstances justify it. Such circumstances include automation confusion, error failure, or when automation systems do not function as intended. The issue may be further complicated by the variation in pilot training skills and experience of pilots entering air carrier service worldwide. Although there are numerous safety benefits provided by automation, such as preventing errors, an over-reliance on automation can introduce new hazards and risks. When these systems do not work as intended or do not work well in the operational situation, pilots without sufficient manual flight control experience and proper training may be reluctant or may not be adequately skilled to take control of the aircraft. It is important to seek a balance in training of automation and maintaining manual flight control skills. That being said, there is a continual critical need for pilots to maintain and be confident in their manual flight skills when the operational circumstances justify it. Therefore, the Assembly is invited to support the proposals set forth in Working Paper 296 and engage in further study of potential pilot training improvements to address automation dependency. We also urge the Assembly to support the recommendations in Working Paper 122. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, United States. I will now invite Canada to present working paper 122. Canada, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's IATA who's going to present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
IATA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. IATA is pleased to present Working Paper 122 together with Canada, Singapore, the United States, and the Flight Safety Foundation. The paper outlines a 12-point strategy for pilot training and competency during times of increased complexity and rapid growth, urging a pragmatic, data-driven approach to pilot training, essential for the continued improvement of industry safety performance. Industry and regulators need to embrace and have the flexibility to adopt competency or evidence-based training and assessment methods that target real-world risks and ensure a progressive and satisfactory performance standard. It cannot be assumed that critical skills and knowledge will be obtained through experience or current training methods alone. Additionally, as technology evolves in the cockpit environment, training and licensing of pilots must remain fit for purpose. The Assembly is invited to consider the 12 strategic points in its working paper. Half of these strategic items address pilot and instructor evidence-based and competency-based approach, including retaining proven traditional training components. The other three items mentioned develop effective training standards defined by ICAO industry partnerships, considering ab initio approaches and maximizing simulation and new technology. And the remaining emphasize screening processes, effective CRM or programs that emphasize understanding the appropriate use of automation and manual flying. Thank you, Chairman, for this consideration.
Thank you very much, IATA. It's now the turn of IFATSI to present working paper 105. IFATSI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and delegates, for this opportunity to present the IFATSIA, or International Federation of Air Traffic Safety Electronic Association, IFATSIA Working Paper 105. Over the past 20 years, the world of aviation has developed new infrastructures which support air traffic management, including but not limited to NextGen and CSAR. The global ATC equipment market is projected to exceed $6.7 billion by 2025. The main function of ATC equipment is to assist pilots and controllers with navigation, communication, surveillance, and most importantly, avoid collision during flight. The need for the constant improvement is driven by growing air traffic congestion, expanding airport capacity, and the rapidly developing airline industry competing for market share. This in turn requires air traffic safety electronics personnel, ATSAP, to keep pace with a new and evolving skill set to protect from cyber threats. It is clear that the nature of cyber threats to aviation will change over time. This submission proposes a practical, systematic approach to the development of training and competencies, enabling a new generation of staff capable of realizing our shared vision of safe and secure digital aviation. Some organizations may suggest we take a holistic approach, a wait-and-see approach. Over the past several years, we have seen many governments, states, military, and financial institutions which have been subject to data breaches, malware attacks, hacking campaigns, supply chain manipulations, and have been held hostage with ransomware. Cyber attacks have disrupted businesses as well as created financial impacts. These organizations have learned from these events and built a dedicated
point of order, IFATSI, you've gone beyond 2 minutes. Could you summarize in 20 seconds, please?
IFATSIA invites the Assembly to note the information contained in the Working Paper 105 and requests the Civil or Council to undertake the necessary steps to develop a new ATSEP set of basic competencies, safety, security, and cybersecurity, together with the correspondence training. One last item. IFATSIA supports AFCAC Working Paper 174 and the United Arab Emirates Working Paper 150 and Informational Working Paper 151. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and delegates.
Thank you very much, IFATSI. It's now the turn of Canada to present Working Paper 256. Canada, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Problems relating to substance use and mental health are widespread throughout the world and affect millions. And all states need to review their practices and measures to address mental health problems and the dangers of substance abuse. ICAO and the international community have adopted a number of standards and recommended practices in these areas. However, it's possible to do more and draw greater attention to this problem and introduce appropriate measures to address this global challenge of mental health and substance abuse so as to ensure prevention, early detection, and proper management so as to mitigate the threat to safety. Canada is determined to further strengthen aviation safety in relation to substance abuse and mental health at national and international level in consultation with industry stakeholders and international partners. Canada is developing and updating regulations and standards to promote aviation safety in Canada and internationally in accordance with ICAO standards. In so doing, this working paper invites the Assembly to support ICAO in promoting a healthy global aviation environment by continuously addressing mental health and substance use disorders, reducing the risk of aviation accidents and enhancing safety. Encourage states to continue placing greater emphasis on promotion of education and awareness about mental health and substance use issues of aviation personnel. Request that states share information and best practices. And finally, recommend that the appropriate expert groups and panels add a further study to their work plan to address substance use disorders and mental health issues in respect of Annex 19 Safety Management. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. We have two more papers in this batch, WP 125 and 123, to be presented by the United Arab Emirates. UAE, you have the floor for both papers.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. تقدم دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة ورقة.
Thank you, Chairman. We are presenting Working Paper 125. This working paper addresses the issues concerning alcohol and drug use by aviation personnel. It highlights the importance of introducing and enforcing the testing program in the aviation industry, and it emphasizes the benefits of this program. The action. The Assembly is invited to conduct a global survey and analysis, a global analysis of the ability of states to understand and overcome the alarming phenomenon of psychoactive substance use. Also, to identify actions that the global community would be required to implement, since borders may act as the laundry or cleaning up of a medical file. An individual declared as symptomatic by a state may be reaccepted into the aviation system of another state. Also, to develop a basis and framework for data and information sharing of medical files among states, in particular for states largely depending on the conversion of foreign licenses, like the United Arab Emirates. And adopt a proactive approach towards enhanced education solutions for the attention of license holders, which focus on the wise use of over-the-counter or prescribed medication and on safe drinking habits. Now, I would like to present Working Paper 123. This paper relates to obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, Obstructive sleep apnea is a main cause of excessive daytime sleepiness and increases the risk for driving accidents, which could perhaps be normalized by treatment with continuous positive airway pressure ventilation. Since it is estimated that approximately 80% of OSA cases are not diagnosed, the recognition of patients at risk for accidents is a problem from both the medical and the societal points of view. Strategies to enforce best screening tools for identifying subjects at high risks for accidents are paramount in order to improve flight safety, especially for commercial pilots who show an increased risk of OSA in accordance with the current GCAA current statistics. The Assembly is invited to acknowledge that OSA is an emerging medical issue that could significantly affect human performance, and current detection means may not be effective. And to instruct ICAO to develop current medical guidance that will include education and awareness solutions for the attention of aviation medical examiners, license holders, focusing on maintaining a healthy lifestyle and the early identification of OSA to hinder the development of the diseases. Instruct ICAO to define a new protocol to enhance the detection of OSA through more appropriate screening tools used by the AME, diagnostic methods, and treatment options. And urges states to apply safety management principles and use the aeromedical data to enhance global flight safety by reviewing their methods for identifying high-risk license holders, by treating them, and finally, by decreasing the morbidity and mortality rates of the individual and decreasing the burden on insurance companies, and at the same time, decreasing the impact of the fatigue caused by this medical condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, United Arab Emirates. Distinguished delegates, we really must keep to agreed 1 minute presentation time, 1 minute intervention. Otherwise, we'll not complete our agenda for today. And I believe the working papers were published weeks in advance of the assembly. So we've all had a look at them. So I will entreat presenters to just give the highlights of the paper within a minute, the executive summary, and even for long action points, you could refer the committee, the commission to note the action points for the commission, and that will suffice so that we can really complete our tall agenda item for today. We may have to adopt the tactics of the executive committee if we don't really manage time well. After a minute, the sound will just go off, and that will be it. Let's not use that, but let's try to keep to time to ensure that we have a successful meeting. Because after Saturday, a number of states came complaining that some of the interventions were too long and it prevented others from also having the floor. So let's be concerned about the time so that as many states as possible and industry will be able to make interventions. Thank you very much for your understanding. Thank you. So we note several IPs related to the agenda item, that's competencies in aviation medicine. Specifically, we have IP 540, 300, 553, 445, 446, 169, and this will reflect in the report. I'll now give the floor to Secretariat for any clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to paper 105, we'd like the Commission to note that provisions for competency-based training and assessment for ATSEPs will be contained in PAN's training. It has gone on final review by the Air Navigation Commission, and those provisions are expected to be applicable at the end of 2020. Guidance to accompany those provisions will be in the Manual on Air Traffic Safety and Electronics Personnel Competency-Based Training and Assessment, document 10,057. And please note that the framework in both PANS training and this document may be adapted by a training provider to incorporate specific training elements such as cybersecurity. The next edition of Doc 10,057 is underway in its final process of publication, and any specific guidance for that document with regard to cyber security or anything else may be taken into consideration in any future editions of the document. With regards to working papers 256, 125, and 123, enhanced awareness and health promotion around obstructive sleep apnea, mental health, and substance use disorders are addressed through Amendment 173 to Annex 1 and relevant guidance, including the Manual of Civil Aviation Medicine, document 8984, and the document Fitness to Fly, a combined publication of ICAO, IATA, and IFALPA. These documents were developed in accordance with safety management provisions contained in Annex 19. Given that the appropriate expert group has work streams on these subjects as a result of actions taken by the ICAO Council, the contents of these working papers may be forwarded to the appropriate expert groups. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Secretary, for the clarifications. I'll now open the floor for discussions. Brazil, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and fellow delegates. Brazil supports the working paper 296 presented by the United States. From the aircraft design and type certificate standpoint, it is assumed that pilots are adequately trained and capable of dealing with normal and abnormal situations without exceptional piloting skills. Even though it is supposed that pilots will indeed be capable of operating highly automated aircraft, we agree that an over-reliance of automation can introduce new hazards to the lack of practical manual flight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brazil. Singapore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Singapore agrees that pilot training is an important subject. There are growing pilot training needs which are further compounded by the anticipated global shortage of pilots. We need greater focus on the effectiveness of pilot training. We have expressed our views in Working Paper 122 that was just presented by IATA. Working Paper 296 by the United States calls for the establishment of a personnel licensing and training panel, among other recommendations. This would definitely augment the work currently being done. For example, the development of competency-based training and upset prevention and recovery training. We therefore support the call by the United States for a personnel licensing and training panel to be established. With regard to Working Paper 256, Singapore shares Canada's views concerning the risks posed by substance use and mental health disorders on aviation safety. We fully support the call to promote a healthy global aviation environment by addressing mental health and substance use disorders, as well as the sharing of best practices. We should encourage the adoption of a consistent approach towards testing and management of substance use that can address the root causes of mental health issues. In addition, ICAO could facilitate the sharing of best practices in this area through the relevant ICAO working groups for safety management and aviation medicine. We also support UAE's Working Paper 123, requesting for more attention to be paid to address obstructive sleep apnea. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Singapore. Council, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all. We would like to give our comments on Working Paper 105 from AFATSIA. The effort of AFATSIA to emphasize the increasing importance of information security is welcomed. However, the lines of reasoning and conclusions put forward are not as stringent as presented. The paper sees the responsibility for information security exclusively in the hands of ADSEP. This intervenes deeply in the freedom of design of the respective work processes of the ANSPs. Moreover, this position completely ignores the possibility and perhaps even necessity of organizing information security in different ways, in different layers, with different and sometimes staggered responsibilities, with mixed teams of various qualifications. The paper proposes the creation of the job profile of an information security ADSEP. Although this is a possible measure as a concept and in its focusing on the interfaces only, it reaches out far too short. The awareness on information security must be built and maintained by all ADSEPs, not just for a few specialists. The paper criticizes the insufficient training content on the topic of information security. Alongside IFATSEA's proposal for the creation of an information security ATSEP with very in-depth expertise, this statement is to be accepted in principle. However, for the majority of ATSEP, this conclusion is not true. CANSO has been acting on various multilateral committees for many years to improve the quality of training requirements and training content for ATSEP. For the start, CANSO also worked closely together with the...
CANSO, could you summarize in 15 seconds, please?
I do my best, thank you, but this is very important. But I'll do it in 15 seconds, sorry. As stated by the Secretariat, currently input of the ATSEP training objectives are provided by CANSO into the update of the ICAO ATSEP training manual. Consequently, instead of focusing on the future role of ATSEP in digital environment, it is recommended to kick off a joint discussion with the social partners on the overall challenges, opportunities to enable digital aviation. To that extent, starting a more general and holistic approach rather than starting bottom-up with ATSEP activities should be the way ahead. Thank you, and sorry for the time.
Uruguay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. On paper 296, it's recognized that the trend toward automation dependency could lead to a loss of skills and training among crew, especially with younger crew without as much experience. It's important for crew to be able to maintain their manual flight skills and be able to deal with unexpected events and failures. As a result, SARPs need to be developed at the global level so that states and industry can ensure the development of robust crew training programs that are regularly updated to keep up with the pace of technology. And this should include recovery and in case of loss of control. So we support paper 296. With regard to paper 122, it's important for candidates to be properly trained and prepared, and so training programs should include training methods-based, competency-based and evidence-based training programs. And flight time should be accumulated properly. Special attention should be given.
Thank you.
5 seconds. A los programas para la formación.
Special attention should be given to flight instructor programs, and proper experience should be obtained. Thank you.
Thank you, Uruguay. Rwanda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Rwanda supports Working Paper 296 with some suggestions. Executive Summary Action 5. The action appears to be linked to paragraph 2.7 with reference to gap analysis. To satisfy the actions as stipulated in the Executive Summary, it is suggested that a gap analysis should be conducted with the sections, organizations, groups mentioned in paragraph 2.8 and 2.9 of the working paper. It is further suggested that the Assembly considers one more recommendation, that is, to review by Operations Panel Annex 6 9.4.4 Pilot Proficiency Checks and PEL Panel Annex 1 Chapter 2 Renewal Requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rwanda. France, you have the floor.
President. Thank you, Chairman. France supports Working Paper 122 presented by Canada, which recognizes the importance of a multi-pronged approach that's competency-based and evidence-based and data-driven, so as to better train the next generation of professionals in the context of growing demand. We thank the United States for raising the issue of pilot competence in relation to automation in Working Paper 296. We agree that manual flight skills are a major asset, but that competence should be seen as part of the whole package of pilot skills, in dealing with automation, especially next generation. Measures were recently introduced in the low-cut program and in national regulations. We believe that crew resource management is one of the major safety factors in case of complex failures, and training should be evidence and competency-based. ICAO, of course, should continue to take a global, multi-pronged approach to developing all pilot skills necessary to address automation dependency. Data collection and analysis will serve to assess the relevance of safety measures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Franz. IFALPA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. IFALPA strongly supports Working Paper 296 on pilot training improvements to address automation dependency. We especially urge ICAO to act on item A5 to establish a personnel training and licensing panel, as recommended by the ICAO Personal Training and Licensing Exploratory Meeting in July 2019. We would also like to add our support for the 12 action items as a whole in the conclusions of Working Paper 122, but would add our own word of caution not to sacrifice quality for efficiency when it comes to pilot training. Experience does count when helping pilots develop airmanship and the situational awareness needed in today's complex aviation environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, IFALPA. United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States supports Working Paper 123 and notes the FAA has a well-developed training programs that incorporate obstructive sleep apnea training with elaborate protocols for medical examiners as well as educational materials for pilots. Applying these safety management techniques prevents high-risk or at-risk pilots from flying without proper assessment and monitoring. The United States looks forward to contributing to further technical discussions on this topic. The United States also supports Working Paper 125, noting that the Accident Investigation Panel and Medical Provision Study Group either have previously discussed or engaged in ongoing work in this area. The United States believes that drug and alcohol testing programs for personnel that perform safety-sensitive functions are important, given the potential of drugs and alcohol to impair human performance and thereby contribute to accidents resulting in the loss of life or property. We would also like to note our support for Working Paper 256 and appreciate the support from our fellow delegates regarding our paper on 296. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, United States. China, you have the floor.
China supports U.S. paper WP 296. Manual operation is a basic skill for operation at this stage. It is fit to pay attention to this aspect. If this proposal is adopted, China will support the panel. China also supports WP 122. China at the present time we're doing a project training of pilots in this aspect. We support work undertaken by ICAO. We also support WP 256. We support member states to exchange within the framework of ICAO. Thank you.
Thank you, China. South Africa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. South Africa supports Working Paper 122 presented by Canada, Singapore, and United States. South Africa believes that the paper is highlighting critical points in its conclusion. We would like to propose that ICAO, through its process, consider elements contained in conclusion A to L of this paper. South Africa further supports Working Paper 296 presented by United States, Canada, Peru, Trinidad, and Tobago. South Africa believes that the training improvements to address automation dependency is an excellent idea and should not be limited to pilot training, but be extended to other disciplines, such as ATC engineering, etc. I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I recognize that we have overwhelming support for the papers 296, 122, 105, 256, 125, and 123. And Secretariat has already clarified that lots of the action requested in 256, 125, and 123 will be forwarded to the appropriate expert groups for action. And 296 has received overwhelming support that is dealing with the consequences of automation dependency. So I'll take two more, or let's say three, to give distinguished delegates the opportunity to speak. Three more, then we'll try to conclude, because the screen is very, very full. Republic of Korea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Republic of Korea supports Working Paper 122 and Working Paper 296, seeking to enhance pilot training and competency, and supports Working Paper 105. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. Venezuela.
Thank you, Chairman. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela shares the concerns expressed in Working Paper 296 with regard to ensuring the maintenance of piloting skills and automation in the cockpit, and the importance of reducing automation dependency. We also share the concerns set out in Paper 122 on competency-based training across different cultures. We encourage further efforts by all stakeholders in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Venezuela. Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, delegates. Trinidad and Tobago supports Working Paper 122 and the conclusion therein. I think this is necessary to avoid the reversal of gains made with respect to safety. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Japan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Regarding Working Paper 125 presented by United Arab Emirates, Japan recognizes the importance of medical information sharing between states. On the other hand, each state has its own legislation on medical information protection and usually protected by privacy laws. So Japan would like to propose developing basis and framework for data information sharing of medical files between states with due consideration of the legal framework on medical information protection. And Japan supports Working Paper 256 presented by Canada. Japan submitted Information Paper 446 titled Preventing to Perform Duties by Flight Crew Members Under the Influence of Alcohol, for your attention to our recent event and measures against it. The actions contained in the information paper are also covered by the action proposed by Canada. Therefore, Japan supports Working Paper 256. Additionally, for your attention, Japan submitted Information Paper 445 titled Fatigue Management for Flight Crew. From Japan's recent experience, which urged member states to implement fatigue management of flight crew members in accordance with SAPS and guidance material. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I still see Saudi Arabia and Argentina wanting to intervene. Please keep it extremely short, please. Saudi Arabia, Argentina. Saudi Arabia first.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. المملكة العربية السعودية 25 مقدما من الإمارات العربية.
Thank you, Chairman. We support Working Paper 123, 125, and the action items. We especially recognize that actions need to be taken to create a framework for information sharing on medical files among states, especially as regards licensing, and we also support Working Paper 296 by the U.S.
Saudi Arabia. Argentina.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Argentina supports Working Papers 105, 122, 296. We believe that training of technical personnel has to take a multi-pronged approach which will enhance safety. We also support Working Papers 123, 125, and 256. Argentina has developed recommendations to the Accident Board in accordance with what is set out in Working Paper 125. Thank you.
Thank you very much. United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to Paper 105 from IFATSIA, the UK reflects the comments of the Secretariat and CANSO. We support the idea of helping ATSEPs to be clear about their role in managing cyber issues, but please do not start a new ATSEP stream to accomplish this. Instead, expand the existing training syllabus to include cyber security awareness training. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. This concludes batch 30.4 on competencies and medical issues. To summarize the discussions and conclusions, the Commission agreed to the following points. 1, the Commission agreed that ICAO should have a group of experts review the proposed recommendations to mitigate the consequences of automation dependency and how they may be addressed at the global, regional, and national levels. 2, the Commission also agreed that due to the global growth in commercial aviation, a pragmatic, data-driven approach to pilot training was essential to the continued improvement of the industry's safety performance, and that all stakeholders should embrace a competency-based training and assessment methodology for pilot training. 3, the Commission agreed that cyber security may be incorporated into the recommended competency-based training and assessment framework for ASEPs in the future, and noted that the existing framework could be adapted by a training provider at any stage to incorporate such elements as required. And finally, concerning the aviation medicine working papers, given that the appropriate expert group has work streams on these subjects, the contents of these working papers should be forwarded to the appropriate expert groups. The Commission also agreed with the sharing of best practices. Thank you very much. I hope this reflects the essence of our discussions. I see no objection. Thank you. We'll then move straight away to batch 5. Batch 5 deals with safety management. I'll now invite Qatar to present working paper 143.
Safety management requires that both state and service provider promote a positive safety culture with the aim of fostering effective safety management implementation through the State Safety Program, SSP, and Safety Management System, SMS. There is a link between the maturity of the safety culture and the level of implementation of safety management. Operators, service provider, and also some state have conducted safety culture survey to achieve greater level of safety in civil aviation. For that purpose, establishing a common safety culture survey to measure in a standardized way the safety culture at state level would provide a common platform for the evaluation of safety culture. The surveys should be designed at level of ICAO, establishing the methodology to use, the target audience, and the time frame and promotion. The SSP implementation assessment and safety culture survey would provide a better feedback on the evolution of safety maturity at state, regional, and global level. The Assembly is invited to ensure the development of safety culture survey document, including the complete set of information needed for its deployment. Invite Regional Aviation Safety Group, RASG, to conduct that survey, as well as to include the analysis result in the RASG annual report, and present the outcome of that analysis at global level to identify the area requiring more attention and to define the appropriate support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Qatar. It's now the turn of the United Arab Emirates to present working paper 98. UAE.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, my country, UAE, presents working paper 98 concerning the way the IAG can contribute to the implementation of the SSP in order to enhance linkages between accidents and incident investigation and the state safety program functions to revise in the air accident investigations and safety management system provision Annex 13 aircraft accident and incident investigation and Annex 19 safety management and the associated guidance material. The responsibility of accident investigation is upon various agencies. The investigation authority has the responsibility to the national level in order to determine the cause of accident. The results of the accident investigation should be integrated with other systems. The final report is a tool to document the conclusions concerning the risks and the recommendations. Therefore, the final reports of the accident investigations can enable the state to look into the causes of the accidents as stipulated in the working paper in order to enhance the linkage between AIG and SSP. The guidance material in the document 9757 and 9859 should be strengthened in order to show this interaction between AIG and SSP. Lastly, the United Arab Emirates calls upon the Assembly to do the following. Request the ICAO to require the existing AIG and safety management system panels.
We note the action points. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'll call on Canada to present WP 258. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada appreciates the opportunity to present Working Paper 258 and wishes to have a revision of the Working Paper noted. The revision reads as follows: for the type, design, and manufacture of aircraft, engines, and propellers. Subsequently, the word aircraft to accompany the phrase should appear throughout the document. Canada kindly requests the Chair and the Secretary to update the report to reflect this revision. Canada first would like to confirm its strong support for SMS. Canada is a strong advocate for safety management principles and its application to improve aviation safety around the world. Working Paper 258 discusses the need to allow sufficient time for regulatory frameworks to be better structured and reflective of the ever-evolving aviation industry. Therefore, Canada invites the Assembly to consider a postponement of the applicability date of 7 November 2019 for Amendment 1 to Annex 19, Safety Management, which extends the applicability of an SMS to organizations responsible for the type, design, and manufacture of aircraft, engines, and propellers. The paper further examines the requirement to accommodate the needs of these organizations while enabling them to efficiently manage change, manage growth, and maintain safety levels. Canadian organizations establishing SMS under Amendment 1 extensions have expressed great concern for the applicability date of 7 November 2019 and recommend that the date be postponed. A revised effective date will commensurate with efficient management of change and maintain safety levels during this implementation process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Canada. We note the following information papers related to the sub-agenda item on safety management. IP 539, 370, 502, 70, and 146. I'll now give the floor to the Secretariat for any clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So just a few clarifications and reminders. Once a standard has been adopted by the ICAO Council and the effective date has passed, thereby bringing to a close the period of time in which states can register their disapproval as per Article 90 of the Chicago Convention, the standard is enacted. As Amendment 1 to Annex 19 became effective on 11 July 2016, The proposal for the postponement of the applicability date must be subjected to the established process for the amendment of an ICAO annex. It should also be noted that since the standard for aircraft design and manufacturing organizations to implement an SMS became applicable on 14 November 2013, in the absence of the engine and/or propeller design and manufacturing organization having an SMS, the scope of the SMS of the aircraft design and manufacturing organization necessarily includes the engine and/or propeller. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Secretariat, for the clarifications. I'll now open the floor for discussions. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all. We thank each delegation who has presented a working paper under this badge. With view to working paper 258 presented by Canada, Germany is reluctant to support the proposed postponement. We are convinced that we should not disconnect the engine and propeller manufacturers from the rest of the industry. And please also keep in mind that the proposal would also lead to a delay in regard to the requirements on safety data protection and confidentiality. Most of us are also aware that there are discussions right now going on in the Executive Commission on a postponement on the safety management audits to 2021. The exclusion of engine and propeller manufacturers, as proposed here, would further reduce the efficacy of safety management implementation. On a more general note, we still regard it as necessary to carry out safety management system audits at an early stage, earlier than 2021. This, of course, requires a high quality of the relevant protocol questions. This is what the work should focus on, and we know that the Safety Management Panel and the Air Navigation Commission is already active here, and we are also thankful for the clarifications by the Secretariat, and we concur with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nigeria would like to express its reluctance to support the working paper 258, requesting that ICAO should postpone the applicability date of November for the Amendment 1 to Annex 19, which extend the SMS implementation to organizations responsible for type designs and or manufacture of engines and propellers. We consider this to be rather late in the day. The amendment was adopted as far back as March and was effective July 2016. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. The Netherlands, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. The Netherlands would like to thank Qatar for working paper 143 and concur that there is a strong link between the level of implementation of safety management and a mature safety culture. In that respect, actions to enhance safety culture are supported, and we encourage organizations to undertake evaluations of the safety culture maturity within their organization. However, we have to take into account that safety culture is understood and interpreted in many different ways today. Therefore, we have to be careful that measuring safety culture can be subjective before we impose a common way of assessing safety culture as a basis for a common metric. In addition, differences in legal frameworks around the protection of safety data and protection of reporters may not be compatible with a common, globally accepted safety culture survey. The benefit of performing safety culture surveys lies not so much in the result obtained, the measurement itself, but in the process of surveying itself and the communication around safety that needs to take place within an organization when performing the survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Netherlands. We'll invite Nicaragua to take the floor.
Very good morning, Chairman, Good morning to all. The state of Nicaragua supports Working Paper 98 by the Emirates. Given experience in reducing the accident rate in Nicaragua, we have found that we need to further strengthen the link between AIG and SSP. Thank you.
Thank you. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will make this very short. I would like to, Kuwait would like to support working papers 143 presented by Qatar, 98 by United Arab Emirates, 258 by Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuwait. Austria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Concerning working paper 258 presented by Canada, Austria does not support the postponement of the deadline with all the arguments already presented by Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Austria. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Argentina agrees with Nicaragua, and we would add that sharing of information on a reactive and proactive basis will enhance state safety in an efficient and effective manner. So we support the working papers, working paper 98. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Argentina. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States supports Working Paper 258 and its recommendation to postpone the Annex 19 Amendment 1 effective date of 7 November 2019 as it relates to the extension of an SMS to organizations responsible for the type design and or manufacture of aircraft engines and propellers. The United States also recommends that the Assembly consider an amendment to this annex for a 3-year postponement to the effective date, as this period of time would allow the United States and other member states to implement rulemaking under a priority basis. With regard to Working Paper 143, the United States believes strongly in the importance of a robust safety culture at all levels and supports the development of national and or regional surveys to assess safety culture. We also recommend utilizing tools and guidance already developed by the Safety Management International Collaboration Group, specifically the Organizational Culture Self-Assessment Tool for Regulators, description, Industry Safety Culture Evaluation Tool and Guidance description, and the Safety Management System Evaluation Tool. The RASGs provide a forum for states and other stakeholders of the aviation system to work together to improve safety on a regional level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, United States. There's a request from industry. Is it council? You can say council or ACC AIA? IATA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding Working Paper 98, IATA believes that accident investigation authorities should have access to human factors data sources as the local laws and judicial system allow, and that tight controls such as the balance test should remain to assure privacy and appropriate protection in accordance with Annex 19. In regards to Working Paper 143, IATA supports the intervention as presented by the Netherlands. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, IATA. There's one more request from industry. Anybody from industry wishing to take the floor? I see none. Thank you very much. Council? Council, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would like to thank Qatar for Working Paper 143. Safety culture surveys are a good thing. However, we believe that ANSPs, for example, should conduct the surveys for ATM. Having ICAO conduct these global and or regional level is a huge undertaking and would require a great deal of effort and resources to achieve this. Therefore, CANSA believes the ANSPs should conduct the surveys and openly share the results with the states and others relevant in the stakeholders. One other comment regarding the wording in the paper. The introduction of a safety culture survey at the global, regional or state level would certainly accelerate the improvement of safety maturity, which would foster the achievement of the GASP vision, mission and goals. Conducting a safety culture survey would provide insight to where the organization is in regarding their progression of a positive and proactive safety culture. However, it does not guarantee success according to us. And further, we support the comments of the Netherlands on this paper. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Secretariat has requested for the floor for another intervention. Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A clarification from the Secretariat. I think we've had interventions, a couple of interventions in support of Canada's Working Paper 258, but I want to make clear that the Assembly report, in any case, will be reviewed by the Air Navigation Commission, and the recommendations from the report will be forwarded to the ICAO Council for review during the 219th session to be held 24 February to 13 March of 2020. States are reminded of their obligation under Article 38 of the Chicago Convention to notify differences to ICAO if they find it impractical to comply or are otherwise unable to bring their own regulations into accord with Amendment 1 to Annex 19 by the 7th of November 2019. That same provision is true if they were unable to comply with the provisions that came into force in 2013, which I presume that both Canada and the United States and other states who may have differences will have done. So for the Commission's consideration in finalizing this review. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Secretary, for the additional clarification. I see no further requests for the floor, so we can summarize our discussions on batch 5. To summarize the discussions and conclusions, the Commission agreed to the following points. The Commission agreed that the initiative for a safety culture survey and an invitation for RASC to conduct that survey should be reviewed by the Council. Also to be referred to Council were enhancements to ICAO provisions to reinforce the linkage between accident and incident investigation activities and the state safety program, as well as the need to improve the SSP-related USWAP-related protocol questions. The Council will need to review these items with respect to existing priorities funded through the 2020 to 2022 budget and the availability of extra budgetary resources. On the issue of postponing the applicability date for the SMS for type design and manufacturers of aircraft, as well as engines and propellers, the Commission also agreed, in light of the discussion, that the proposal for postponement of the Annex 19 Amendment 1 provisions related to the implementation of safety management systems be reviewed by the Council, taking into consideration the views put forth. I believe that summarizes our discussion on batch 5. I see no disagreements. Thank you very much. We move straight into batch 6. Batch 6 deals with accident investigation and airspace issues. I will now invite Argentina to present Working Paper 398. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Working paper 398 is on a proposal for follow-up of safety recommendations by AIGs. This is a useful tool to monitor safety. Accident incident investigations aim to identify contributing factors and latent risks and prevent future occurrences. It's important to identify deficiencies, and to that effect, safety recommendations can be issued. Many organizations have procedures and methods for follow-up of safety recommendations. That's the case of the US, Canada, France, and Europe, among others. But many other states do not have such procedures. The Argentine Republic in recent years put forward its program, which has already received over 160 replies in the 2015-2019 period. We're also adapting the manual for safety recommendation follow-up. One possible recommendation to raise awareness with regard to implementation of procedures is one problem is a lack of awareness and a lack of independence of aviation authorities and investigation authorities. It's necessary to implement an effective follow-up program, and countries should cooperate and transfer knowledge and experience on safety recommendation follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Argentina. Argentina, you still have the floor for WP 416. Argentina.
Thank you very much. Working paper 416 is presenting a proposal for psychological and physical monitoring of aircraft accident investigators if they have been exposed to aggressive agents or hazards. And hazards might be biological, such as human or animal remains, cargo, characteristics of the accident site, ground installations, and other factors. The context of investigations in field work can pose risks to the physical and psychological health of investigators. And risks vary depending on the aggressive hazards. Proper clothing and equipment can reduce the risk, but nonetheless, follow-up procedure is necessary to identify risks and diagnose and effectively treat any pathologies that are detected as a result of field work by accident investigators. In conclusion, states are urged to take action to protect investigators from any physical and psychological harm following investigations, and we encourage states to support RASCs and PIRGs in conducting preventive procedures for the detection and treatment of diseases that might develop as a result of accident investigations. We urge states to provide timely information on progress in implementation of plans for treatment and prevention of diseases. And finally, we ask Council to consider establishing a procedure to identify hazards, examine persons who have been exposed, and diagnose and effectively and timely treat pathologies likely to be caused by field work by investigators. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Argentina. I now invite Trinidad and Tobago to present working paper 347. Trinidad and Tobago, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, delegates. This paper highlights the challenges faced by small states which are required to comply with the requirements of Annex 13, Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigation, and the resulting low level of effective implementation of the standards and recommended practices. Currently, all states are audited to the same standard irrespective of your level of aviation complexity. It matters not if you're a manufacturer or design and build, or you're a state that simply has a number of aircraft on your register. Trinidad and Tobago is of the view that the root of the audit findings and the low level of effective implementation lies in the structure of the annex and the guidance material. We argue that the concept of document 9760 for airworthiness can be effectively applied to the AIG protocol questions. The paper suggests that ICAO should establish a panel or a system to review the process used in auditing and evaluating states' compliance to the SAPs of Annex 13 and Doc 9756. The aircraft manual of aircraft accident and incident investigation, using the concept similar in airworthiness of aircraft, document 9760. ICAO is asked to note the action in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trinidad and Tobago. I'll now invite the United Arab Emirates to present working paper 96, UAE.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. The United Arab Emirates are presenting Working Paper 96, which contains a proposal to establish a repository on the ICAO website to facilitate the exchange of information, knowledge, and experience among states' aircraft accident investigation authorities, the State Safety Program personnel, as well as human factors specialists, psychologists, aeromedical examiners, aviation pathologists, research centers and institutions, and others. In order for analysis to be effective, the safety recommendations must be using a specific system. And so the relevant factors must be presented. There are four important eras in aviation safety. It's the technical factors, human factors, organizational factors, and those relating to the total system. We would like to ask the Assembly is invited to note the context of this working paper, to request ICAO to consider facilitation of regular sharing of information, knowledge, and experience related to human and organizational factors analysis relating to aircraft incident and accident investigation, etc. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, UAE. The representatives of the Air Crash Victims Families Federation International are not here. They submitted WP 149, so I invite Secretariat to provide highlights of this WP. Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This statement is read on behalf of the chairwoman of the Air Crash Victims Families Federation Association International, Ms. Pilar Vera Palmas. Mr. President, the association is composed by victims and victims associations from various countries in the world whose cultures and way of living are very different. However, the people who have suffered the loss of our loved ones in an aircraft accident have in common that, and faced with the official cause of accidents, we have found that most of the final reports are in a language that we don't understand. One of the most grievous sensations that a human being can suffer when tragically losing a family member in an air accident is misunderstanding or not understanding the cause of their death. And knowing this eases and helps to overcome one of the mourning phases for which we have been through. The association has grown by almost 1,000 victims and their families over the past 11 years, and we face the unimaginable on behalf of our loved ones. We ask states to please support the working paper and its content from the moral authority of the victims helping victims, so that future victims and their families will have the security that we did not benefit from, the security of understanding. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Secretariat, for providing the highlights of the paper by the ACVFFI. It's now the turn of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to present working paper 162. DPRK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Good morning to all distinguished delegates. The working paper 162 provides the impact analysis of suspended services such as Jefferson, Collins studies, and CETA, which are essential to the international air navigation. DPR Korea has hardly implemented ICAO SOPs regarding those services, thus has the challenge to provide air travelers safety. While we are proud of our safety record, we are actually aware that its fatality in air travel is one but too many, that we have to continue to work hard to further improve aviation safety. We are connected by common single-thread air travel, even though we live separate geographical locations. It is mandate that we have to diligently work hard and cooperate each other under the leadership of ICAO for the safe, secure, and efficient air transport, as enshrined in the Chicago Convention and no country left behind. So I ask Assembly is invited to note the impact analysis of suspended services and kindly request ICAO to take proper action. Thank you, your Chairman.
Thank you very much, DPR Korea. I'll now invite Kiribati to present Working Paper 138. Kiribati, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, fellow delegates, observers, ladies and gentlemen. The Republic of Kiribati is one of the small island states, a member of the Pacific Islands Forum, and while one of the smallest states in terms of population, one of the largest states in terms of our footprint on the globe and size of our exclusive economic zone. This paper describes a concept for airspace management, a concept which has been recommended in many reports over the past 25 years, a concept which is consistent with the ICAO policy for changes to airspace boundaries, and one which will improve the overall system safety by reducing the need for coordination and the number of responsibility changes for the management of airspace flying across the vast Pacific Ocean. Unfortunately, despite the almost universal recommendation for change in the reports over the years, the concept and necessary change has not been progressed until now. We acknowledge that the process for change will take time and that many supporting stages which need to be undertaken in regional aviation forums as well as other regional forums. However, unless the process is commenced, it can never be accomplished. The paper informs ICAO contracting states of the process intended in progressing a change in the airspace arrangements in the Pacific to ensure that the sovereignty of individual states is recognised in the management of airspace overlying those states. It seeks to advise the Assembly prior to the commencement of regional activity leading to the submission of a formal change request to the Asia-Pacific Regional Office. The issue has great importance within the Pacific Islands Forum, and particularly within the Small Island States Leaders Forum, which was held during the 50th meeting of the PIF leaders in Tuvalu last month. As a measure of that regional importance, His Excellency Tanes Mamu, President of the Republic of Kiribati, raised the issue of sovereignty of the airspace overlying the exclusive economic zones of the Pacific at the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York on Wednesday night last week. The airspace concept described in the paper has been endorsed at the last 3 meetings of the Pacific Islands Forum, more recently at the Leaders' meeting which was held in Tuvalu last month, where the SIS leaders reaffirmed their commitment to pursuing the change as part of the Blue Pacific initiatives. In order to partially diffuse some sensitivities which have been expressed concerning the recommendations, we propose a change to the wording of recommendation small b. Therefore, the Assembly is invited to A, note the information contained in the paper, B, note the plans for a single large block of centrally managed airspace in the Pacific encompassing the airspace overlying the sovereign territories of the Pacific Island Forum Small Island States, and C, discuss any relevant matters as appropriate. In conclusion, Kiribati is one of the less than 2% of states entitled to attend this Assembly who do not have the ability to determine which organisation provides safety separation services and airspace management in the upper airspace overlying their sovereign territory. The eventual implementation of the proposed concept for airspace in the Pacific will provide that ability to Kiribati and other small island states. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Kiribati, for the presentation of WP 138. We have one final paper in this batch, that is WP 170, to be presented by Ukraine. Ukraine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to present working paper 170 on behalf of Ukraine. This working paper presents an overview of current situation on air traffic management aspects, safety issues in Simferopol FIA, in particular in the airspace over the high seas, where responsibility for air traffic services is delegated to Ukraine on a basis of international agreements between Black Sea states and approved by ICAO Council in 1997. And highlights problems as well as step forward and what done by Ukraine under ICAO umbrella in close cooperation with International Aviation Organization, civil aviation authorities toward the normalization of flight operation in the high seas airspace over Black Sea. Ukraine considers that strict observance of conventional international civil aviation and its annexes, as well as United Nations General Assembly resolution, is of utmost importance for all ICAO member states with stakeholders of aviation community in the modern challenging environment. Situation where one of the ICAO member states does not observe fundamental provision of the Chicago Convention as well as ICAO standards may be potentially hazardous to the international air navigation, leads to a significant reduction of efficient airspace utilization, and presents a challenge not only for state concern in this particular case for Ukraine, but for the whole network. Therefore, the Assembly is invited to support effort undertaken by Ukraine in close cooperation with international organizations and our state aviation authorities toward normalization of flight operation in the airspace over high seas within Simferopol FIA. Call upon the Russian Federation to strictly adhere to the Chicago Convention, its annexes, and withdraw aeronautical information publication of the Russian Federation related of the airspace within Simferopol FIA, in particular other high seas, and agree that ICAO shall undertake effective measures to hold accountable member states that violate the Chicago Convention and its annexes, including interference into air navigation services provision in the international airspace, which is under the responsibility of another member state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ukraine. I'll now give the floor to, before then, we note IPs 384-513-377 related to the sub-agenda item, and they will reflect in the report. I'll now give the floor to the Secretariat for any clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. With regards to Working Paper 398, it occurs to the Secretariat that existing programs and procedures relating to follow-up of safety recommendations could be made available on an ICAO website by states lacking such programs. To that end, the Commission might wish to agree that the proposal be referred to the Council for further consideration. On Working Paper 416, Circular 315, Hazards at Aircraft Accident Sites, in which guidance on the management of occupational health risks in aircraft accident investigation is contained, does not address psychophysical monitoring of investigators. On this basis, the Commission may agree to refer the issue of the establishment of psychophysical monitoring programs for investigators to the Council for further consideration, taking into account existing priorities funded by the coming budget. There may also be a need to encourage states who have established such programs to provide timely information on the implementation of those programs and states to support RESGs in their deliberations on the establishment of psychophysical monitoring programs for investigators. As regards Working Paper 347, it should be noted that USOP CMA abides by the principles of universality, as well as systematic, consistent, objective approach when performing its activities, allowing the program to monitor all ICAO member states in a standardized and uniform manner. It is recalled that discussions on regional cooperation in investigations under Agenda Item 29, when the Commission recommended to expand the guidance on RIOs to include other regional cooperation mechanisms. With regards to Working Paper 96, there would be considerable challenges related to access resources required to maintain a data repository as proposed. For accident investigators, the e-library, should I say accident and incident investigators, the e-library of final reports of the ICAO AIG website makes approximately 2,000 accident and incident final reports available for reference purposes. And ISASI already seeks to inform its membership of human performance through its website. The existing ICAO Safety Management Implementation website may be used to provide further information about and examples of hazard identification and risk management, including those related to human and organizational factors. Concerning Working Paper 149, while recognizing the importance for families and victims to properly understand the information contained in final reports, one should also be mindful of the challenges and difficulties to be faced by the states during the investigation to translate the final report in all native languages of the victims and their families, as dozens of different nationalities could be involved in any major accident nowadays. The Commission may wish to consider expanding relevant guidance material to address the subject covered in this working paper. And finally, Mr. Chairman, as regards Working Paper 170, this matter is within the purview of the European Air Navigation Planning Group, Black Sea Task Force. This group has been established to support ICAO initiative to progressively normalize their air traffic flow in the airspace over the Black Sea and create the necessary coordination mechanism to enable and implement operational and technical solutions mutually acceptable to all parties. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretariat, for the lengthy clarification. You exceeded your time limit, but it's okay. They had to comment on several papers. We understand, but I think it's thrown a lot of light on the various working papers. Thank you. I will now give the floor to distinguished delegates to comment on the working papers. Spain, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning. I'm going to comment on 4 working papers. First, 398 presented by Argentina. Follow-up on safety recommendations is something that Spain has insisted on before, following accident investigation in our country. We have European standards, and we believe that this is of utmost importance to scale it up globally for greater safety. And we thank Secretariat for their suggestion of a method for addressing this proposal. With regard to Working Paper 96, presented by the United Arab Emirates, we believe that the creation of such a repository would be beneficial in identifying threats and risks. We recognize the difficulties mentioned by Secretariat in such an endeavor, and we would suggest, therefore, starting with the safety recommendations issued by accident investigation authorities. Spain also supports Working Paper 149 presented by the International Victims Families Association. Families have a right to understand the final report in their language. As Secretariat pointed out, this could be resource-heavy requests, so we would suggest that in order to avoid delays in publication of the final report as a result of translation, and to prevent overloading the investigating state, we would suggest that recommendation be introduced into Annex 13 so that states whose nationals have perished and who have designated an expert to take part in the investigation to take over translation of the report once the final report has been published, issued by the state conducting the investigation. And finally, on Working Paper 170 by Ukraine, the delegation of Spain supports the efforts undertaken by Ukraine in cooperation with international organizations to normalize flight operations in high seas airspace in the Simferopol FIR as a means of achieving an acceptable solution under the Chicago Convention annexes. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. Nicaragua.
Gracias. Thank you. Nicaragua supports papers 398, 416 by Argentina on accident investigation and the importance of follow-up of safety recommendations issued by the AIG authority, and we think it's important to ensure that investigators are protected. We also support Working Paper 149 by the International Victims' Families Federation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicaragua. Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. So the Islamic Republic of Iran supports the Working Paper 162 presented by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We also would like to support the Working Paper 398 presented by the Argentina. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Islamic Republic of Iran. Republic of Moldova.
Thank you, Chair. The Republic of Moldova would like to support the document 170 as presented by Ukraine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the Working Paper 149, when an accident occurs, the investigation authority has to spend many resources with the investigation itself. In this sense, the translation of a final report to all the language of the victims involved would represent a cost too high for the AIG authority. Although we understand the need of information of the families of the victims, this could represent a decrease in the financial resources available for the investigation, which could lead to a less deep research and less effective safety recommendations, final purpose of the investigation. It's important to notice that an accident may have people from many countries with different languages. It's also important to consider that the translation of a final report involves knowledge of technical language. Having in mind all that was said, Brazil would like to respectfully disagree with this proposal and invite all member states to reflect on the consequences of this working paper and the need to prioritize resources in order to enhance safety. Regarding the Working Paper 416, we understand the importance of taking care of the investigators regarding the hazards to which they are exposed during an accident investigation. However, the procedures regarding the crash site safety are best practice, well known by the community of investigators, and they are taught in many aircraft accident investigation courses. We also understand that if an investigator has a physical or mental pathology as a consequence of an aircraft accident investigation, which is his or her job, the AIG authority should provide him with all necessary support to be treated, as occurs in any other profession. In this sense, to develop a specific plan for that would be justifiable if we had data indicating that this type of problem occurs frequently. Otherwise, the cost-benefit analysis would indicate that the normal existing procedures would be enough to deal with it. This way, Brazil would like to propose that before establishing additional plans and procedures, a statistical survey be accomplished in order to confirm or deny the need for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Mr. Chairman. The Russian delegation calls upon the Assembly not to support the actions proposed in Working Paper number 170 presented by Ukraine. Appendix G of ICAO Assembly Resolution A3812 states that it established ATS airspaces should not be segmented for reasons other than technical, operational, safety, and efficiency considerations. The Russian Federation firmly believes that the approaches set out in Working Paper 170 do not serve the interests of flight safety of international civil aviation. They do not take into consideration the technical capabilities and resources of ANSPs, which make it possible to guarantee safe and efficient management of air traffic flows and the efficient conduct of search and rescue operations in the relevant segment of the international airspace. In order to develop a technical solution for assigning responsibility for ATM over the Black Sea, it would be useful to activate the work of the Task Force for the Normalization of Flights in the Airspace over the Black Sea, known as the Black Sea Task Force. And therefore, it would be useful to activate the group's work and rather than considering this issue in other forums. On this basis, the delegation of the Russian Federation again calls upon the Assembly not to support the actions proposed in Working Paper 170. Thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation. Romania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We support Working Paper 170 presented by Ukraine, and we encourage ICAO through its Paris Regional Office to recommence the work of the Black Sea Task Force in order to identify a unanimously solution to resume air traffic in normal conditions in the airspace over the Black Sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Romania. Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trinidad and Tobago acknowledges and accepts the comments of the Secretariat with respect to Working Paper 347 and Agenda Item 29, and look forward to the work with regard to Agenda Item 29 and an opportunity to comment on the amendments when these become publicly available. Thank you.
Thank you. United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding Working Paper 162, this organization is not the proper venue to debate U.S. sanctions against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and a vote here will not change U.S. national security policy towards the DPRK, nor UN Security Council resolutions pertaining to the DPRK. The DPRK has demonstrated its willingness to threaten civil aviation by conducting unannounced missile launches and remains in flagrant violation of UN SCRs by maintaining its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. We ask that ICAO act both within the letter and the spirit of the UN SCRs by limiting engagement with a country that flouts these resolutions and by avoiding any activities that violate these resolutions. Regarding Working Paper 138, as amended, the United States recommends that Kiribati and other Pacific Island states follow the prescribed process to address this subject. It is critical to ensure that any changes to the delegation of high seas airspace abide by the Chicago Convention and support regional solutions based on consensus to cooperate to make volumes of airspace safer and more efficient. The United States also refers the Assembly to Appendix G of Resolution A28-4. Regarding Working Paper 374, the United States recognizes the variation in aviation activity across ICAO member states and acknowledges the challenges for some states. The United States has found that delegations of investigation to be a viable option available to investigative authorities. Regarding Working Paper 96, the United States supports sharing information and best practices, but is concerned, as stated by the Secretariat, about overly burdening existing ICAO resources. We believe that existing ICAO obligations such as the ADREP database discussed in Information Paper 513 should be addressed before taking on additional initiatives. Regarding Working Paper 149, the United States fully supports the concept of providing information in a timely and equitable manner to meet the needs of the aviation accident victims and their families. However, as noted by the Secretariat, the United States is unable to support Working Paper 149 as the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board does not translate its reports and believe this would impose an unrealistic expectation on investigating states. Finally, regarding Working Paper 398, The United States believes that the importance and benefits of safety recommendation are well recognized, and this relies on concerted effort to track and monitor responses and actions taken by addressees. We note that recent amendments to Annex 13 reinforce obligations for states to record recommendation responses and monitor the progress of actions taken. Thank you.
Thank you, U.S. Paraguay.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you for giving us the floor. Paraguay supports working papers presented by Argentina, 398 on follow-up of safety recommendations. We support implementation of a program to follow up on safety recommendations by the AIG as a useful tool for addressing this matter. We also support Working Paper 416, Assistance Protocol for Accident Investigators. Thank you.
Thank you. Venezuela, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela supports Working Papers 398 and 416, presented by Argentina. We believe it is important to protect the psychological and physical health of accident investigators in the instance of hazards in the work site. Thank you.
Thank you, Venezuela. Australia.
Australia, thank you, Chair. Australia appreciates the Working Paper 138 provided by Kiribati and notes the variation to Recommendation B and appreciates that as well. But Australia also notes that we have recently had the delivery by ICAO of a Pacific Small Island Developing States Aviation Needs Analysis Study, which raises some very important safety issues. Therefore, Australia would suggest that these issues, as well as the issues in this paper, need to be considered, and notes that there is a meeting planned of Pacific Island ministers in the first half of 2020 in Papua New Guinea, which may be an appropriate place to discuss those issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. China.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. China supports WP 162. Implementation of UN Security Council resolutions shall not bring negative impacts to DPRK. In terms of civil aviation safety, China recommends ICAO Council shall work with the UN Sanction Committee. And we also I would like to comment on WP 170. China attaches great importance to air navigation safety, and we hope ICAO would listen to all parties concerned and engage with them to find a solution and to ensure air navigation safety in this region concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Norway.
Thank you, Chair. I will be very short in my intervention. Norway fully support Working Paper 170 and the recommendations in the paper as presented by Ukraine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norway. South Africa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Regarding Working Paper 149, we like to align ourselves with the proposal that to refer the matter for further deliberation before expanding on the subs. Regarding Working Paper 347, our interpretation of Annex 13 already makes provision under Chapter 5 for delegation of wholly or any part conducting an investigation to another state or a regional accident and incident investigation organization by mutual agreement and consent. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Civil Air Navigation Services Organization, we would like to support Working Paper 138, presented by Kiribati, and notes Australia's comments and agrees that further discussion is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council. Fiji, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Fiji is also a member of the Pacific Island Forum, does not support Working Paper 138 presented by Kiribati. The Pacific region already has well-established air navigation service providers which offer interoperable, efficient and seamless air navigation. Working Paper 138 does not represent the Pacific region's view on upper airspace management, most notably Fiji. And we would like to further press upon that issues of upper airspace is of a sovereign matter. And as recommended in the SIS meeting referred to by Kiribati, it is imperative that Kiribati and other Pacific Island states engage in bilateral and multilateral discussions on the control and management of upper airspace at the next Pacific Islands Aviation Ministers meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Fiji. Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nigeria would like to express our support for Working Paper 398 and 416 by Argentina. With regards to Working Paper 347 by Trinidad and Tobago, while Nigeria recognizes and agrees with the challenges that were articulated in the Working Paper, however, a regional investigation system can provide economies of scale by allowing for the sharing of required resources. To this effect, the ICAO document 9946, Manual on Regional Accident and Incident Investigation Organization, and the provisions on delegation of an investigation to a regional accident and investigation organization, which was introduced in Annex 13, and Assembly Resolution Alpha 38-12, Consolidated Statement of Continuing ICAO Policies and Associated Practices related specifically to air navigation, also recommends that states cooperate in the investigation of accidents, and that states afford opportunities to states seeking investigation experience to attend investigation of accidents in the interest of developing and furthering investigation expertise. We would like to inform the Assembly that in line with these arrangements, Nigeria has successfully done an investigation delegated to it by Sao Tome and Principe as part of the Bagaya. Also, we did similar for Ghana and the Niger Republic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. We'll call on IASA to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving the floor to European Union with respect to Working Paper 170. We are happy to note the good collaboration between the Ukrainian authorities and the Eurocontrol on the use of the 4 routes over the high seas in the Simferopol FIR. The reports provided to the European Aviation Safety Agency showed that there are no incidents with safety impact. However, the current situation with inconsistent and even conflicting aeronautical publications is not satisfactory, and we would like to underline the strain this situation is putting on the performance of the European network. Furthermore, we would like to emphasize that Ukraine is the internationally recognized state having responsibility to provide services over the high seas portion of the Simferopol FIR, and that 5 years on from the illegal annexation of Crimea, the European Union remains steadfast in its commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty over its airspace. Recalling the overarching need for all states to comply with the Chicago Convention and the relevant annexes, the European Union reiterates that it does not recognize and continues to condemn violation of international law. We advocate and would fully support ICAO in taking action to ensure such compliance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union. France, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding Working Paper 138 by Kiribati, France believes that the Assembly, the highest body of ICAO, cannot approve plans it does not know about, and we have noted that Kiribati did withdraw that request in session. This clearly is a bilateral or regional issue, as Fiji highlighted. With regard to the sentence in paragraph 1.3 mentioning potential economic benefits, we would like to recall that air navigation charges are not intended to finance state economies. With regard to working paper 162 presented by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, France endorses the statement by the United States. The DPRK should participate in civil aviation activities as a member of the international community, but above all, they must fully discharge their obligations under the resolutions of the UN Security Council, in particular, Resolution 1718, 2000. 770 and 2310. The DPRK should comply fully with the UN Security Council's resolutions and their obligations under the Chicago Convention as a member of ICAO, so as to ensure aviation safety. France would like to recall the conclusions of CDEC 2012-1 of the Council of October 6, 2017. With regard to working paper 170 by Ukraine, France would like to give its support to this paper. We commend Ukraine on its efforts to gradually harmonize international air traffic over the Black Sea. These actions have been recognized by a number of civil aviation authorities, including the French DGCA. And 4 route segments are available for flight planning over the Black Sea in accordance with the conditions set out in the Ukrainian aeronautical information. We are concerned to read in paper 170 that the Russian Federation continues to publish competing aeronautical information. This is a serious violation of international rules, which can undermine the legal order of ICAO. France therefore supports the statements by previous delegations supporting paper 170, in particular a call for ICAO to take action to uphold international law in this matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, France. Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, distinguished delegates. Georgia strongly supports the working paper 170 as presented by the delegation of Ukraine. I would like to use this opportunity and bring to your attention that unfortunately Georgia faces similar challenges, having 2 illegally occupied territories of Abkhazia and Trinwali region, South Ossetia. In order to ensure safety of international air navigation, the airspace over the occupied territories are subject to special rule and special legal regime according to the law of Georgia on occupied territories, which prohibits any unauthorized international air traffic in 2 regions of Georgia. Thus, any unauthorized flight operation performed in those territories is a breach of the fundamental norms and principles of international law, the Chicago Convention provisions, and at the same time ignores flight safety and aviation security requirements. Moreover, this kind of illegal steps contradicts the norms and principles of the UN Charter and blatantly violate Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. As Abkhazia region represents an integral part of Georgia within its internationally recognized borders, any flight operation in respect to its sovereign airspace are solely subject of authorization and approval from the government of Georgia. Unfortunately, in the context when the government of Georgia is deprived of the possibility to exercise its legitimate jurisdiction over its sovereign region due to illegal occupation, safety and security of flights cannot be guaranteed. We agree that ICAO shall undertake effective measures to hold accountable member states which violate the Chicago Convention and its annexes, including interference into air navigation services, provision in the international airspace which is under the responsibility of another member state. Adherence to the principles and standards of Chicago Convention and its annexes by all member states are of utmost importance to ensure safety, security, and efficiency in aviation. At the same time, I heard, with respect to Black Sea Task Force, which is in the European region, I happen to be part of that group for some time, and unfortunately I have to declare that the effectiveness of the group might be questioned. And exactly this is a place where the situation should be tabled and discussed. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Let's remember to keep our interventions short. I recognize the issue of fire boundaries is always thorny. I was personally involved in one 4 years ago, and you know, there was the willingness of the parties to resolve the problem with the help of the ICAO WACAF regional office and the headquarters here, and we found a solution. So I believe if all parties resolve to, you know, move forward, we will be able to resolve the issue. And I can appreciate your sentiments on the issue, but a resolution will be found. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Argentina would like to support Working Papers 96, 149, and 347. We believe that with regard to Working Paper 149, we believe it is important to make sure that report can be properly read and understood by states involved. And Argentina's investigation board has issued final reports in this way. With regard to paper 3447 and action item B, we believe that this proposal should be considered by the Council. So this should be subject to further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Islamic Republic of Iran also would like to support and second the consideration and concerns of the Russian Federation on the working paper of 170. We should remember that it is necessary that the Assembly Resolution 838-12, Appendix G, which states that the limits of the ATS airspace, whether over a state's territories or over the high seas, shall be established on the basis of the technical and operational consideration with the aim of ensuring safety and optimizing efficiency and economy for both providers and user of the services. In addition, for the purpose of finding safe technical solution of the issue of the air traffic management in the airspace over the Black Sea, the ICAO Black Sea Task Force has been established and has been functioning for nearly 4 years already. Therefore, it is important to activate the work of this task force and find a solution within the framework prior to the consideration of this issue at any other ICAO bodies. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Iran. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding working paper 162 presented by DPR Korea, Japan's position on this issue is that DPR Korea shall participate in several activities, including civil aviation area, as member of this international community. After DPR Korea fully meets its obligation of UN Council resolutions. From this point, it is necessary that DPR Korea fully complies with relevant UN Security Council resolutions and meet its obligations of the Chicago Convention as a member state of the ICAO in order to ensure the safety of civil aviation. We have to continue to make sure not only if DPR Korea officially expresses its commitment to comply with relevant provisions of the surplus of the Chicago Convention, but also if DPR Korea implements concrete measures to comply comply with the relevant provisions of SARPs. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Canada, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. As regards Working Paper 170, we will not repeat the comments made by other delegations. Canada would like to confirm that joining the Chicago Convention and its annexes are in order to avoid confusion and ensure the safety and security around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Poland.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Fully support Working Paper 170 presented by the Ukraine, and we fully support that. It's time to understand that the safety has no borders, so we advocate and fully support ICAO in taking an action to ensure the compliance with applicable standards in this FIR. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Poland. We'll let IATA speak. IATA?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding Working Paper 96, IATA supports the notion of human and organizational factors in the context of accident and serious incident investigations. And we acknowledge that the access to personnel files, including medical information, must be in accordance with the legal framework of the state and the protection principles as outlined in Annex 19. De-identified aggregate information on human factors may prove valuable when identifying trends or risks to a state safety program. However, individual personnel records must remain private and only accessible when a judicial authority deems it necessary after balancing between an individual's right to privacy and the specific investigation needs. The purpose of the SSP is to identify risks in the state's aviation system as a whole and not individual service providers or employees. IATA also supports the comments by the Secretariat that existing repositories may be utilized to share and learn from aggregate de-identified human factors information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, IATA. We have 4 more requests, and this should conclude the discussions. We'll take them in this order. Vanuatu, Albania, France, and DPR, Korea. Vanuatu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to Working Paper 138, Vanuatu proposes that this paper be delayed pending further consultation on aspects that are technical and operational, legal and legislative, as well as a wide range of sovereign airspace matters that are complex and peculiar in nature across the different sovereign jurisdictions in the region. Vanuatu believes this paper must focus on technical and operational standards of the upper airspace management to attain the desired standards of upper airspace services throughout the region, as opposed to considering its economic returns. Working Paper 138 correlates to some important matters raised in Working Paper 47, as alluded to by Australia, which provided an update on Pacific Island states' aviation needs analysis tabled by Papua New Guinea at the Executive Commission and acknowledged to the benefit of all small island nations globally. We believe addressing Pacific's upper airspace management matters would enable ICAO and the Pacific Island states to address some of the safety and audit shortfalls that have plagued the Pacific countries' abilities in addressing compliance and audit program standards, thereby resolving a wide range of challenges across the whole spectrum of its aviation sector in order to meet these ICAO requirements. Mr. Chair, we have 4 navigation service providers in the Pacific region. The Pacific, with its partners, is able to resolve its own issues, first and foremost by a wider consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanuatu. Albania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Albania would like to fully support Working Paper 170 as presented by Ukraine, and would like to express that the BSTF group has not met since a long time and needs to effectively address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, France. Yeah, sorry. The last presenter was Albania. Point of correction. France, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. France would like to express its concern regarding the difficulties mentioned by Georgia and recall that we would like to uphold the territorial integrity of Georgia and its internationally recognized borders and the continuation of negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you. DPR Korea.
Thank you, Chairman, for taking floor. So let me just explain just their request for reopening the suspended services is to ensure aviation safety for the passengers traveling to and from DPR Korea. So therefore, I strongly emphasize that UN resolution shall not be used as a tool to undermine the safety. So those countries relating to suspended services shall be faithful to the Chicago Convention, as they mentioned already. Before I close, regarding the working paper 170, I support Russian Federation, so that's why that one is very important issue, should be discussed and negotiated concerned parties. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. This concludes our discussions on this agenda item related to accident investigation and airspace issues. It's tended to be quite emotional, but we have to move on. We are a technical commission, and so we'll attempt to summarize as follows. The Commission agreed to refer the proposal to the Council on the dissemination of programs and procedures for the follow-up of safety recommendations, noting that such could be made available on an ICAO website. The Commission also agreed to refer the issue of the establishment of psychophysical monitoring program for investigators, taking into account existing priorities funded through the 2020 to 2022 budget. Concerning the challenges faced by some states in complying with the investigation provisions in Annex 13, the Commission noted that USWAP CMA abides by the principles of universality when performing its activities. The Commission noted existing guidance on regional investigation systems in Doc 9946, which will be expanded to include other regional cooperation mechanisms as agreed by the Commission during the discussions on regional cooperation in accident and incident investigation under Agenda Item 29. Provisions on delegation of an investigation to another state or a regional accident and incident investigation organization in Annex 13 were also noted. In light of this, the Commission acknowledged the challenges faced by some states to discharge their investigation obligations and called on states to consider the establishment of other cooperation mechanisms for investigations as an alternative to RIOs. Concerning the establishment and hosting by ICAO a data repository of human and organizational related factors gathered from accident and incident investigations, the Commission recommended that the ICAO Council review the proposals with respect to existing priorities funded through the 2020 to 2022 budget. The Commission agreed that the Council should consider expanding relevant guidance material to address translation of final reports into the native languages of the accident victims and their families, taking account of the perspectives expressed during the discussion and with respect to existing priorities funded through the 2020 to 2022 budget and the availability of extra budgetary resources. The Commission noted an impact analysis of suspended commercial aviation services in DPR Korea. The Commission noted also that the Council of ICAO remain continually informed on the subject, including developments, maintaining coordination with the United Nations. The Commission also noted the Pacific Island Forum and its small island states considerations for upper airspace management in the South Pacific. The Commission recalled that these matters were governed by formal procedures approved by the Council of ICAO, and that the initial steps remained a purview of the relevant states and, as necessary, the ICAO regional office concerned. Concerning the overview of ATM in the Simferopol FIR, the Commission noted the ongoing measures of Ukraine to facilitate safe provision of air navigation services. The Commission further noted that this matter was within the purview of the European Air Navigation Planning Group Black Sea Task Force, creating a coordination mechanism to enable solutions mutually acceptable to all parties. The Commission supported the need to encourage these efforts. Thank you very much. I do hope this reflects the essence of lengthy, emotional, charged discussions on this agenda item. Thank you very much for your time. We still have a tall list on today's agenda. We will do our best to see how far we should go. Apart from 30.7, which is very, very long, about 32 working papers, we have to consider the reports of Agenda 27, 28, and 29 today. So I'll hand over to Secretariat to suggest a way forward for consideration of the papers under batch 30.7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good day, everybody. There is an opportunity for this final batch to be done today with your accommodation and appreciation for the best use of your time. If we do not finish this agenda item today, it will mean that we will come back on Wednesday morning only to review agenda item 30 draft report. I'm sure you appreciate that may not be the best use of your time. So let me suggest, Mr. Chair, a possible way forward. Every working paper in the batch 7, and that's 32 papers, which will take more than easily an hour and some to present. Action has already been taken by the ICAO Council, by the Air Navigation Commission. In many circumstances, the item is already on the work program and a job card has been determined for the appropriate expert group. And even in some circumstances, the work actually has been completed. Most of the papers, the action by the ICAO Council was taken in relation to recommendations from the 13th Air Navigation Conference and in a small number of cases going back to the last assembly. Mr. Chairman and delegates, I am wondering if we could forego the actual presentation of the papers and go directly to discussion and attempt to complete the discussion and summing up of the papers today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Distinguished delegates, there's a proposal before you. We assume we've all read the working papers. We have 32 papers to consider. So the decision is to possibly invite the Secretariat to provide any clarifications on the working papers. Then we go straight into the discussion. And I do hope we have your support. South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is supported from South Africa.
Thank you very much, South Africa. I see no objections. No objections? Okay, thank you, Secretariat. Excellent, brilliant proposal. Thank you. So we proceed, and I'll just invite Secretariat to provide clarifications on any of the working papers before we go into discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could politely ask you for one more accommodation. I can remove around about 23 interventions on working papers by telling you which recommendation of the 13th Air Navigation Conference this action was taken by the Council. If I could forego that, and you'll see that information in the report, I can just highlight the critical items for the Secretariat. In this respect, I would like to refer your attention to Working Paper 120. Working Paper 120 indicates support for action taken by the ICAO Council in response to the Air Navigation Conference 13 Recommendation 5.1/1, Operations Above Flight Level 600. ICAO is currently taking a methodical, stepwise, collaborative approach to determining provisions for the upper airspace, and therefore the action proposed in A, to have a uniform flight level 600, may be premature at this time. However, the paper might be brought to the attention of the appropriate group. With reference to Working Paper 419, the Commission is reminded that regional SAR agreements, to be consistent with Annex 12, need to be appropriately coordinated with the states concerned. Any consequent amendment to the applicable Air Navigation Plan or the Regional Air Navigation Plan remains a regional prerogative. Working Paper 85 also is reflected by a recommendation approved by the Council from Air Navigation Conference 13. However, the action to update the Global Air Traffic Management Operational Concept might be referred to the appropriate expert group. Working Paper 119, the actions proposed also come from the Air Navigation Conference 13 and have been approved by the ICAO Council. Nevertheless, the contents of the paper, especially matters related to the need to consider interdependencies between key performance areas, might be forwarded to the appropriate expert group for further consideration. In relation to Working Paper 110, Doc 10086, the Manual on Information and Instructions for Passenger Safety, includes guidance on baggage-related matters in evacuations and other considerations. While there has been consensus to date within the appropriate expert group that operator procedures, instructions, and information to passengers and cabin crew training were the best means to deal with this issue, the contents of the working paper might be referred to the appropriate expert group. Working Paper 147, Annex 14, contains provisions related to the establishment of an emergency plan at an aerodrome. The Airport Services Manual provides complementary guidance. In the context of family assistance provisions in Annex 9 and Doc 9998, ICAO policy on assistance to aircraft accident victims and their families, encompassing airport operators, you may wish to note that Doc 9137 is due to be updated as part of the current Secretariat work programme. On this basis, you might therefore be of the view that the contents of this working paper also be brought to the attention of the appropriate expert group. And one final one, Working Paper 145, several ICAO initiatives are already underway on this topic in relation to change management. ICAO is exploring having an event on the topic of management of change sometime in 2020. There are also several expert groups that touch on this issue. The Commission might agree that the contents of this working paper be referred to these groups. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. So like I stated earlier, we have about 32 working papers, and the floor will be open to discuss any of the working papers, which originally have been grouped into 4 batches. Batch 1, that's 30.7.1, relating to trust framework, RPAS, and ATM. Then batch 2, airport operations and infrastructure. Batch 3, relating to flight operations. And finally, batch 4, relating to accident investigation, SSP and SMS. So I will now invite Grace to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to all. Greece supports Working Paper 369 and its actions as presented by ICCAIA. We also welcome the Working Paper 197 presented by Brazil. However, we have some reservations on Action B, as the 13th Air Navigation Conference outcome didn't make reference to nor imply the establishment of a trust network as suggested by Brazil. The single source identity and its interoperable and efficient network cannot be considered apart from the overall cybersecurity strategy. Policies and frameworks related to cyber resilience should be evaluated in the context of the existing management systems and be considerate of international and industry standards. Strong identification, authentication, integrity of communication, confidentiality have to be guaranteed under an overarching, cross-cutting and very transparent government structure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Grace. Singapore, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Singapore strongly supports Working Paper 207 by ICCAIA. The approval for frequency spectrum under the ITU is a long and complex process, with approvals allowed every 3-4 years at WRC. There is thus a need to plan ahead to ensure that the frequency spectrum is available for aviation use. However, based on the space-based ADS-B frequency approval process at WRC 15, the aviation community can expect to face similar resistance from non-aviation sectors in securing approvals for new radio frequencies. Singapore thus urges State to fully and actively support ICAO's position on radio frequency spectrum needs for civil aviation at the ITU WRC 19. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Singapore. Republic of Moldova.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the summary given by the Secretariat on Working Paper 110, we would like to have a promise from the ICAO that the content of the working paper will be referred to the appropriate working group rather than just notification that it might be referred on these, because we strongly think that there is actually a safety gap on this topic, and the solutions which we have right now is supposed to be settled basically on and solely on the belief that the passengers would behave exactly the way we expect them to do. And we believe we still can do more, and we believe that we still shall do more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moldova Secretariat heard you loud and clear. ICCAIA.
Thank you, Chair. In respect of ICCAIA's working paper supported by IBAC and IFALPA, working paper 272 on helicopter operations, it is our sincere hope that this paper is referred over to the appropriate subsidiary bodies Helicopter operations are an integral and growing segment of today's worldwide air transport system. However, there are constraints that limit helicopter operations that we feel need to be addressed in order for helicopters to meet their full potential in the global air transport system, as well as this transport mode's contribution to sustainable development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, ICCAIA. Russian Federation.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Russian Federation would like to make a comment regarding Working Paper 120, presented by ICCAIA and supported by IFALPA. The Russian Federation considers that it is not useful to agree with the proposed action to the Assembly in A, as presented in the working paper, regarding establishing a common upper airspace altitude boundaries worldwide. Any questions or any issues regarding the upper airspace boundaries must be looked at some specialized, rather, it must be looked at the UN Committee on the Use of Space, the UN COPOS organization, rather than at ICAO or other UN specialized agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russian Federation. Egypt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to comment on paper 393 presented by Cameron to underline that all these foundations exist in Egypt because we have a regulation that forbid the use of land reserve to airports under legal penalties. The mid office has issued RASA 11 concerning the protection of airports, and we would like to underline that Egypt has enough experts and qualified personnel, qualified personnel to benefit to other countries in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Egypt. I'll now invite Spain to take the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, we support Working Paper 295 by New Zealand. In the regulatory framework in the EU, we have the same situation as described in that paper. We particularly support Action Item B with regard to developing guidance on the basis of cybersecurity principles for the aviation sector, which would allow for many different means of compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. IFALPA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. IFALPA would like to draw your attention to Working Paper 179. We disagree with the proposed actions within that paper. The working paper proposes to expedite the short-term transfer of aircraft between airlines regulated by different states, which could result in a reduction of safety oversight. The dual oversight model, if adopted, could result in flight crew becoming responsible or feeling pressured to accept aircraft and operate aircraft that have a reduction in oversight due to the shared responsibility. The dual oversight model proposed does not provide a basis to move forward, as it does not demonstrate that an equivalent level of airworthiness safety can be maintained to current practice. On another note, IFALPA would like to support the proposed actions in Working Paper 287 on the carriage of undeclared and misdeclared high-hazard dangerous goods by aircraft. Thank you.
Thank you, IFALPA. IFATCA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. IFATCA welcomes increased collaboration between stakeholders in order to meet the challenges of the predicted traffic increase. So to that end, the actions of working paper 119 from the first batch are supported. However, IFATCA wishes to highlight that while technology and infrastructure are required, they're only a small part of the solution. On top of the conclusions that Mr. Dalton mentioned earlier, with regards to our Navigation Conference 13, there's also Assembly Resolutions A38-12 and A39-29 that recognize that there's a lack of qualified personnel to support the existing and future air transportation system, which must be addressed by attracting, training, and retaining enough qualified personnel. This can only be achieved with adequate salary patterns, social benefits, and other incentives. These fundamental elements form the basis of a healthy workforce, and thus ensuring an effective development of the aviation sector. Finally, IFATCA agrees that the modernization of the aviation system can only be achieved by building on partnerships, collaboration, and cooperation. In the common effort of all stakeholders, the professional associations must be included. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It's now the turn of Bangladesh to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bangladesh would support the working paper 218 and 100 by UAE, and especially about the 218, we appreciate UAE for readiness to provide assistance to other member state for AIM implementation. Bangladesh values that timely and quality-based assured aeronautical data and information are essential for safety in-flight operation. At the same time, Bangladesh would like to bring the notice that transition from AIS to IAM would be better achieved if ICAO considers development of provisions related to harmonization of AI exam and for the harmonization of AIM under ASBO framework. About working paper 100, since a draft ICAO competency framework was developed by AIGP and it is in the discussion phase for finalization, Bangladesh would like to endorse the proposal of inclusion of competency-based training and assessment, CBTA. We have a further proposal though, and of course it is lined up with the proposed CBTA. As the transferability of competency build up a generation of investigators equipped with long-lasting competencies. Based on the well-defined training and assessment target, Bangladesh also feels that this is a perfect time to start thinking about developing a computer-based training side by side with the proposed CBTA to facilitate the state to train their investigator under the demanding situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bangladesh. Republic of Korea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretariat, for your summary. The Republic of Korea supports working paper 85 of European member states, not only at regional level, but also globally. The network of networks concept can serve a good solution to improve air traffic flow efficiency and overall capacity management. We wish to re-emphasize that a collaborative network operation concept should be based on the principle ensuring predictability and transparency of the overall network operation. Korea also supports working paper 119 of Council, ICCAIA, and Singapore, which has the same view with our working paper 378. Interregional cooperation and additional guideline on performance framework will be essential to achieve effective performance management and harmonize the global air navigation system. Lastly, we support the working paper 465 of Venezuela to address safety challenges of RP-8 operation, and working paper 197 of Brazil, and working paper 369 of ICCAIA regarding trust framework in aviation. Thank you.
Thank you, Republic of Korea. France, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Chairman. France welcomes with interest working paper 120 by industry to respond to future needs of airspace users, we suggest a review of airspace classification in Annex 11 in the appropriate panel of ICAO. We should take account of the diversity of new entrants in terms of performance, capacity, and maturity, and developing a suitable framework. We do not support the request to establish common upper airspace altitude boundaries. The EU concept of operations and regulatory framework work ongoing will be shared with ICAO and other states. France thanks Cameroon for its paper 419. We confirmed that need to strengthen SAR in certain regions with a regional approach. We interpret Cameroon's approach as a strengthened cooperation whereby a champion state leads a collaborative decision-making program for SAR without modifying present work distribution among states. France supports the need expressed in Working Paper 207 to protect the aviation radio frequency spectrum and have new capabilities to allow aviation to benefit from innovations and new technologies. However, we believe that increase in spectrum for aviation is not the best strategy. The likelihood of success is very small in view of the current spectrum, and we should prioritize efficiency gains in the current spectrum to strengthen our position in ITU negotiations. We don't think it is right to say that the methods currently used by ICAO incorporate frequency bands that are not essential for safety. We would rather state that ICAO is seeking the possibility to use non-aeronautical bands for new aviation safety applications. But the application should be integrated into the current bans. France commends Indonesia on the IWISH work set out in document 264. Their work is greatly appreciated by all stakeholders. The role of ICAO, however, is to develop performance requirements rather than develop specific tools. And we think the paper is too prescriptive in its recommendations for the Assembly. Finally, France supports Working Paper 393 presented by Cameroon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, France. I wish to remind you to keep your interventions short. We have 30 minutes to wind up, and we have 13 requests for the floor. And so what does that mean? 13 divided by 13 is 1. So please, 1 minute limit, and that is it. After 1 minute, I will politely interrupt. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Japan support Working Paper 304 presented by China. At the airport in Japan, which is at more than 2,000 feet field elevation, there are few cases for aircraft to have safety troubles such as exceeding exhaust gas temperature limitation, especially in summer. And regarding Working Paper 110 presented by Republic of Moldova, prior to initiate standards development, Japan would like to ask ICAO to consider the feasibility of introducing the requirements for the centralized operational blocks as Royal Aeronautical Society recommended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Japan. Italy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Italy would like to support Working Paper 272 presented by ICCAIA and others. Helicopters operation is shown to be essential in many activities, including emergency situations. Europe has a number of initiatives and regulations that reinforce the implementation of the safety and operational improvements identified in the Working Paper. Italy has successfully implemented ATM solutions for helicopters based on PBM procedures. In particular, we support the development of proposed operational concept for low-level IFR as enabled to enhance safety and weather resilience. Technology is now mature to ensure the development of new operational concepts. However, in this context, we would like to point to the following aspects to be considered in that scope. The business model of helicopters is intrinsically VFR. Many helicopter operations will remain VFR activities. The implementation of PANSOPs rather than PANSOF itself may be a bottleneck to the implementation of IFR with helicopters. Creation of a new network of routes, departures and approaches should take into account the operation of other airspace users. Thank you.
Thank you, Italy. Norway.
Thank you, Chair. Norway would like to comment on Working Paper 173 presented by Council. Even if Norway supports the wide implementation of RNP operations with RF legs in line with the performance-based approach, we do not encourage the wide use of RNP-AR operations. Many applications highlighted in the paper can be supported by other more standard navigation specifications. RNP-AR procedures are intended for challenging obstacle-rich environments. The operational approval process is heavy and the approval burden on operators is very costly. Finally, we definitely do not support the idea highlighted in point 3.7 of the paper, referring to action on commissioning RNP-AR without waiting for sufficient airline equipage or airport-specific positive business cases. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norway. Council, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to come back to Working Paper 119. We accept the interpretation from the Secretariat. However, we would like to highlight actions D and E in the Working Paper, where we ask the support of states to facilitate funding, not necessarily directly by themselves, but facilitating the required upgrades to ATM and CNS systems. For Working Paper 173, I would like to highlight the support that is needed to increase the implementation of RMP-AR procedures, which could be a great asset to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, as stated in the paper and as needed in the basket of measures. Further, we would like to support Working Paper 85 from the EU, Working Paper 359 from Venezuela, 219 from the UAE and 272 from ICCIEA. And as for Working Paper 145, we agree with the comments on the Working Paper from the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards to Working Paper 465, Canada supports the use of gender-neutral terminology and agrees that there is a need for continued development of SARPs and specific guidance material in some of the areas mentioned. At last year's ICAO Air Navigation Conference, Canada presented a working paper that advocated for the use of gender-neutral terminology in relation to unmanned aircraft systems or unmanned aerial vehicles. We are pleased the Council is now considering the use of gender-neutral terminology and that further research will be conducted. However, we support Working Paper 465 in stressing the continued need for attention in this area. As this area of aviation is growing, we have the opportunity to select a proper gender-neutral terminology that is inclusive, accurate, and easy to understand. As ICAO embraces the women in aviation priority, a modern, gender-neutral terminology is a natural continuation of this important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Nicaragua.
Buenas. Thank you. Nicaragua supports the paper submitted by the Victims Association, and we invite the Assembly to pursue efforts to help states achieve functional independence in aviation accident investigations. And Nicaragua also supports papers 351 and 317 by Venezuela. And Cosesna is going to take my mic, if they may, to speak.
Cosesna.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. we support Working Paper 295 presented by New Zealand with regard to implementation of cybersecurity measures. ICAO should support the establishment of guidance in this and to help build a trust framework. This is essential to ensure that communication links are reliable and ensure interoperability and system resilience. We believe that cybersecurity should be mainstreamed in work, and states should be supported in developing critical infrastructure and controls to protect said infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicaragua. Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Concerning Working Paper 119, building capacity in ATM, Austria is not fully supporting Action E, as formulated, that states have to facilitate appropriate funding of ATM systems and CNS infrastructure. Furthermore, states have to ensure that the financial mechanisms are as well effective to enable ATM improvements to be deployed. Just the facilitation of appropriate funding is not enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Austria. South Africa.
Thank you, Chairperson. South Africa supports Working Paper 393 by Cameroon. Regarding Working Paper 264 by Indonesia, South Africa is of the view that the guidance material to handle volcanic ash in a one-window system specification needs to be made available to any vendor system supplier, and states should not be restricted to a singular system. Volcanic Ash Advisory Center already provides this information in a graphical representation. South Africa supports Working Paper 144 by Qatar. In line with ICAO SAPS, the ultimate responsibility for compliance resides with the aerodrome license holder. South Africa therefore like to propose that the appropriate panel further deliberate on the issue. Regarding Working Paper 449, presented by Venezuela, South Africa congratulates the progress made by Venezuela in developing capabilities for op-term exchange in XML data formats. South Africa has already developed capabilities for exchange op-met data in XM formats. Both Venezuela and South Africa may consider exchanging capabilities and effectiveness of their system in time before the 5 November 2020 deadline. Regarding Working Paper 69, presented by Nicaragua, South Africa would like to propose a slight amendment to Recommendation B to include proposed to ICAO to develop guidance material for the state and or accident investigation authority, since there are many chemical and flammable substances, as well as sharp articles that are in the environment and that are harmful if appropriate mitigation measures are not taken. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, South Africa. We're running out of time. United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Secretariat and yourself for the effective and efficient management of this commission. The United States also supports Working Papers 197, 207, 369, 417, and 231. We agree with our colleagues from Russia and France regarding Working Paper 120, regarding the delineation of airspace and where this topic should be referred to. In regards to Working Paper 137 by the UAE, the United States understands UAE's interest in reinvigorating previous dialogues on this topic, but this does not necessarily need to take place through a new working group. Therefore, we recommend that further study be carried out through an existing venue at ICAO, for example, the ISTAR user group. United States supports Working Paper 218 by the UAE. However, we recommend that Proposal A be considered in the normal decision-making process instead of being prioritized above important SARPs impacting all NCLB states. We also support Working Paper 421. However, we also note that several of the competencies identified in this paper are included in Doc 10070, and redundant materials should be avoided. We invite anyone to contact us or ICAO regarding government safety inspector courses, in which we incorporate competencies in Doc 10070. Finally, the United States also supports Working Paper 145 and recommends that the Safety Management Panel consider adding a standard or recommended practice
with language similar to Section 3.2 of Annex 19, Appendix 2, to address management of change. Formal change management processes are a sound practice to ensure that changes are made based on informed decision-making. The management of change is important and should be expanded and used more fully in all SSPs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, United States. It's now 12 noon, and interpreters, could we kindly get 10 minutes to run up? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The screen is still very full, but looking at the general discussions, I recognize a lot of support for the various working papers, except 120 on the upper airspace, where Secretariat clarified that ICAO is taking a methodological, stepwise, collaborative approach to determine provisions for the upper airspace, and therefore the action proposed may be premature at this time. So the screen is full. I really, really appreciate your healthy discussions and contributions on this sub-agenda item. It's been very, very interactive, but we will attempt to summarize. Once we're able to conclude the 30.7, it means we'll be able to include that report for tomorrow's meeting of the Tenka Commission. Yeah, before we go into the summary, I want to find out if any state has objections to the way forward or the recommendations made in any of the working papers. Which country is that? Ireland. Ireland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for indulging. My paper relates to, or my comment relates to Working Paper 179 by Brazil. And I will be very brief. While we welcome the paper, we're not convinced that the dual oversight as presented in Working Paper 179 is an appropriate approach. We're unclear who is ultimately responsible for oversight at any given time and what will happen when the two authorities have conflicting views on certain requirements. As requested in a paper previously under this agenda item, WP 108, we suggest that ICAO conducts a review of ICAO's standards and recommended practices that relate to the role of the state of operator and state of registry to address identified barriers to cooperative oversight and especially interchange of aircraft. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ireland. Argentina.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We have concerns with regard to Working Paper 110 and the possible implications for a centralized system for upper airspace. And since I have the floor, I'd like to support 69, 99, and 100. We think it's fundamental to have independent accident boards and appropriate software and training, universal training for accident investigators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Argentina. I can see. Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with respect to Working Paper 179, this is an issue of economics and safety. The paper speaks to a practice that is currently in use that may be at variance to the current guidance material for aircraft interchange. Mr. Chairman, the paper presented by Brazil pushes the current envelope and asks that we think outside the current box. As a regulator, the issue presented and the practices related thereto is bold, and further analysis of the proposal is worthwhile. TNT supports the further review of this interchange practice and the related manuals and procedures thereto.
Thank you very much. Trinidad and Tobago. Is that IATA? Ayata?
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chair. Referring back to Working Paper 110, proposing to lock the overhead bins as a measure to avoid passengers trying to recover their carry-on in case of emergency evacuation. We believe such issue requires SMS process in order to address the problem and its root cause in an effective and safe manner. Adding technical barriers and obstructions such as locking overhead bins might move the risks elsewhere, creating different hazards and behaviours. It could encourage passengers to store their baggage under the seat or in front of them, instead creating equivalent problems with passengers trying to remove them during an emergency situation. Significant amounts of cabin baggage at the floor level would also create additional trip hazards in the case of normal and emergency situations. During an emergency evacuation, passengers may not realise the bins are locked and continue to attempt to open, therefore delaying evacuation. Emergency equipment is often located in overhead bins. Central locking would therefore prevent access to equipment that is often removed and used post-evacuation, as well as prevent access to passenger baggage to obtain personal medication or carry out firefighting procedures that should events take place during taxi, takeoff and landing. IATA recommends ICAO address such discussions in the ICAO Cabin Safety Group, working with industry and regulators to determine the root causes and make recommendations on the most effective methods of addressing such behaviour. Now referring to Working Paper 173, IATA encourages expansion of the established on RMP-AR concept to include other PBN specifications such as RMP approach and RMP XLS before planning established on RMP operations. NSPs are strongly encouraged to consult with the relevant airspace users and carefully analyse fleet readiness status and operational requirements to utilise the most efficient solutions whilst as required accommodating mixed mode operations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ayata. The concerns by Ireland, Argentina, Trinidad and Tobago and Ayata have been noted by the Commission. This concludes the discussions on batch 30.7. To summarize the discussions and conclusions, the Commission agreed to the following points. In nearly all cases, the work proposed is already part of the work program of the organization, often as a result of action taken by the Council to recommendations from the 13th Air Navigation Conference. So if I do not specifically mention in my summary, you can assume that the issues raised have been dealt with by Council and that further specificity will be in the draft report. In several cases, matters presented will assist the appropriate expert groups progress existing work program tasks. These included a potential update of the global ATM operational concept, the need to consider interdependencies between key performance areas, the contents of WP264 and WP449 on the use of an integrated web-based AIS handling system, the IWXXM respectively, a proposal for locking mechanisms on board all commercial passenger aircraft, guidance for airport operators to develop appropriate plans on providing timely and effective assistance to aircraft accident victims and their families within the emergency plans, and provisions in Annex 19, safety management for the management of change at the state level. Also, the contents of WPs 197 and 272 will be passed on to the appropriate expert groups. Support was expressed by the Commission for action taken by the ICAO Council in relation to upper airspace. However, it was noted that given the current methodical collaborative approach to the work, the proposal to advance a global uniform upper airspace limitation may be premature at this time. The proposal will be forwarded to the appropriate expert group. Finally, the discussion on Working Paper 179, along with the working paper, will be provided to the appropriate expert group. Thank you very much. And I hope this captures the essence of the discussion. I'll hand over to Secretariat. I see two requests for the floor. United Arab Emirates and Spain. UAE first.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. تود دولة الإمارات العربية.
Thank you, Chairman. The UAE would like to thank all the states and all of the organizations who have presented working papers. We invite the states to familiarize themselves with working papers 137, 218, 99, and 100. We would also like to thank the Secretariat for the clarifications and for the good management of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, UAE. Spain.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, I had asked for the floor before you read out the conclusions, and it was to just join Norway in objecting to working paper 173. And we agree with Argentina and IATA with regard to the paper by Moldova on the central locking of the overhead bins. But I would like to take this opportunity to say that we think working paper 86 presented by Europe should have be more specific in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Spain, your concerns noted. So I take it that there are no objections to the summary I just read out. Okay, Ayata, you have the last word.
Do you clarify your comments regarding working paper 110, please?
Yeah, I'll read that part again. Okay, I'll allow the Secretary to clarify. One thing relates to introduction of centralized operational locks for the aircraft overhead bins. Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And the summary for working paper 1110 was that the discussion and the working paper would be provided to the group that is already working on subjects associated with this particular matter, and they will continue working on their work program items. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. I see no further requests for the floor. So thank you very much for a very interesting session. So this brings us to the end of the fourth meeting of the Technical Commission. We will reconvene again tomorrow at 2 p.m. for the fifth meeting. You recognize that the second item could not be considered. That's approval of draft reports. We will push that to tomorrow's order of business. There's election in the morning. Okay, we'll confirm the time for the meeting tomorrow. Please go online. Understand it's in the morning, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So fifth meeting of TC tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. prompt. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch and the afternoon.